So as you know, today we all have gathered here to discuss on a very interesting topic, science and beyond, a Vedic perspective. So often people think that science and Vedas are naturally contradictory to each other. They say that if you accept one, the other is automatically rejected. And this is true for most of the population, including those in India, and especially even to those who are highly educated. So none are actually aware about the scientific part of the Vedas. So before we begin with the session, let me give a small introduction about the speaker. So today we have with us Siddharth sir, who has joined us from USA. So he has a master's degree from the University of Michigan in information science. He has contributed to conferences at MIT, the University of Washington, the University of Paris, the University of Dublin, and many other universities. He is actually known for his discovery of how the Vedic scriptures anticipate sophisticated scientific data in a wide range of fields. So his work has even been featured in Times of India, DD News, and Indic Today. So before we begin, I would also like to say that we also have a Q&A session at the end. And I request you to keep typing your questions in the chat, and sir will definitely address it at the end. So let us now directly hear from sir. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Shailesh. I appreciate it. So a very warm welcome to everybody who has joined today for this talk. I'm grateful to Shailesh for the opportunity to speak amongst you. Growing up, it was always my dream to meet the budding scientists at IISc. I guess, whatever you dream as a child, they always come true. So thank you for the opportunity. So today's talk is titled Science and Beyond, a Vedic Perspective. And that was the title of the conference or this presentation. So without any further ado, let's begin. So let me first give you my talk plan. So there are 4 parts of my talk. We'll be beginning our talk we'll begin our talk with talking about a brief history of Ramanujan. Then we'll talk a little bit about Vyasadeva, and then Vyasadev's most important work, the Puranas. And then we'll try to connect the dots. What's the connecting thread here? So first of all, Ramanujan. I mean, you guys are all budding scientists who have been working for many, many years. And who doesn't know, being an Indian and a scientist, the history of Ramanujan? He was born in 1887, born in a very poor family, didn't have much colleagues who were interested in science or math. And he had this, amazing acumen for mathematical figures and mathematical theorems. Despite not receiving any kind of formal education, and despite not having much support, he was single-handedly able to, write down 3,900 theorems on mathematics, which even to the date, in fact, most recent book being published was in 2017, in which the scholars have taken all of his work and shown that how he was far ahead of everybody in many of the mathematical fields. He's credited with figuring out the partition theorems. There are some other zeta theorems which are credited to him. And in fact, he was one of the youngest fellows of Royal Society. There are many movies which have been made on him, showing how he didn't receive much attention and much credit during his the time when he was alive. But even after he has left his body, people continue to appreciate and acknowledge the wonderful contribution he had made. So here's a story of Rex Surridges, a story of an Indian scientist who had this raw intelligence, this raw capability that was not acknowledged until later time. Now, today's talk, I want to present something similar for another such scientist, another such person, and that's Vyasadeva. Now, Vyasadeva is credited to have compiled the Vedas and Puranas. But in his work also, his work has been relegated to the realm of religion or folk stories or mythology. And very less attention has been given to his work, through the eyes of his, scientific microscope. So in my journey, I personally graduated from University of Michigan in 2014, and I graduated with a degree in data science. And as I had got this interest in studying the Puranas and Vedas, specifically Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. And while studying those, I was always meditating that, hey, these stories, these discussions can't just be folk or mythology. I've been hearing them, growing up my whole life. There has to be something more. And then just a day, I got this inspiration that I should spend, dedicate my life to studying them thoroughly, studying this Vyasadev's work thoroughly. And that led me to, making a few discoveries, writing a book, and doing this presentation with you guys here. So let us look at few important factoids or few important pointers, a few important data points or time points from the Puranas, and let's see how they compare with modern science, and let's see how the narrative goes. So first of all, how old is our knowledge? Now, if I were to ask you, many of you would start saying the Sanskrit suktas. If you have been to any yagna, the Brahmana there would usually start the yagna before by saying, what's the current time? So they would say, currently it is Saptaman Mantra or Seventh Mantra and 28th Chaturyuga. Now, what does that mean? So a Mantra is a time unit which is comprised of 71 Chaturyugas. Don't worry, I won't quiz you at the end, and there won't be any exam at the end. So just enjoy. So there is a Mantra has 71 Chaturyugas, and each Chaturyuga has 4 parts. The Satyuga, the green one here, then the Dwapar Yuga, Treta Yuga, and Kali Yuga. So 4 pieces to it. And then every mantra is followed by also a Sandhya. So these are the basic building blocks of time given in the Puranas. So with that understanding, let's look at how old is our sun. So as I said, we are currently in the 7th mantra. That means 6 have passed away. And we are currently in 28th Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga is practically the end of it. So 28 Chaturyugas have passed away. So when we do the simple calculation, we get this 2092, I should write here, million years. These are million years. So according to the current understanding, or the Puranic understanding, we are roughly 2 billion year old into the solar system. Now, what do scientists say? Scientists say, or the astrophysicists say, that the sun is 4.567 billion years old. Well, there's a big difference. Now, this is the common understanding. If you look on Wikipedia, any common articles, that's what you found. However, as I said, I'm a data scientist, so I started looking deep into it. I would spend sometimes many, sleepless nights studying the Puranas, looking into the commentaries, looking at the Sanskrit and translations, and I made some amazing discoveries. So I took a new look at this whole Puranic units, and specifically also look at the works of Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur, Jiva Goswami, Sridhar Swami, and I found actually that there is actually 2 sets of time units being discussed in the Puranas. There's a time on our earth and there's a time on the Puranic earth. And there's a factor of 2 there. So although most of us know that the Kali Yuga is considered to be 4 lakh years or 4,32,000 years long, actually, according to the Sridhar Swami, the Kali Yuga is 8,64,000 years. I also found out that there is another Sandhya in between the Kalpas, not between Kalpas. So, as I was telling you earlier, these yellow ones, these are mantras, which we looked at earlier. So, 14 mantras make 1 kalpa. And there's also a Sandhya between the kalpas. So, this was not known to scholars before. And I found this out. Now, when we add this up, what we get is a new time unit table for the Puranas. Again, a lot of numbers, don't worry about them, but try to see the red figures and the black figures, how they're double. So the Satya Yuga is 1.728 million years on Puranas, in the Puranic earth, and the earth, for our earth, are the scholars or the Vyasadeva and the Sridhar Swami and other acharyas are pointing out that for us, those same years become 3.456 million years. Similarly, Kalpa, which is 4.32 billion years, becomes 8.64 billion years. So that changed all the numbers which we were using earlier to compute our dates. When we take these new numbers, what do we find? So let's look at this figure. So currently we're in 28th Chaturyuga, 27 have passed away. We are in the current day of Brahma. 6 manvantras have passed away. There was also a Sandhya before this. When you add this up, what you get is 4.563. Let's go back to the previous figure. So according to the scientists, astrophysicists, our sun is 4.567 billion years old, whereas whereas according to the Puranas, it is 4.563. The difference is 0.08%. Pretty startling, pretty stunning similarity there. But this is not the end. As you know, I grew up watching Sachin and Shah Rukh Khan, and how they used to always say, "Ye dil maange more." Does anybody remember that? So I was not satisfied with this one data point. Now I wanted to look at all the data points which are possible in the Puranas. So I'll start looking at more. Now the Puranas have this repeated theme, or this recurrent theme of Pralaya. A Pralaya is it's a catastrophic event where there's a mass destruction, is a mass extinction. And the biggest Pralaya which is discussed in the Puranas is a Pralaya which is during the time of Matsya Avatar. Now, when did that avatar came? And when was this Pralaya? So, according to the Puranas, that Pralaya happened in the previous Manvantara, at the end of previous Manvantara. So, as I told you, we're currently in 7th Manvantara. So, this happened between 6th and 7th Manvantara, towards the end of 6th Manvantara. So, based upon this, if we do calculations, that's where the Pralaya happened in the Satya Yuga. What we get is that the Pralaya happened 251.152 million years ago. And guess what? Our scientists, or specifically paleontologists, state that the Earth was that the Earth had also has many multiple periods of mass extinctions, but the most severe mass extinction which happened on Earth was 251.9 million years ago. So the difference is mere 0.3%. So what's happening here? We all grew up, as my friend Shells were pointing out, hearing that the Puranas are just mythological stories. They're kind of opposite to science. But here I was finding such close similarity between Puranic narrative and the scientific narrative. Now, if you had looked at these data points, say 100 years ago, you would have laughed at the Puranas and Vedas. And that's exactly what happened. In India, for hundreds of years, we were ruled by Britishers, and they bought in that mentality that anything related to Vedas or Puranas is religious, is orthodox, is a false narrative. Because at that time, the science was of the opinion that nothing in this earth was older than few, million years or few 100,000 years, nothing more than that. So these big dates which we had in the Puranas were completely rejected. And in fact, there was never a comprehensive study made of them because nobody thought such big numbers can ever be true. But now if we look in the light of modern science, these numbers are mere 0.1%, 0.3%, 0.08% away from the latest scientific facts. But again, 2 data points is not enough. If you ever have drinks like Pepsi, you got to have some chips. You can't just have 1 chip, you have to take more. Similarly, you got to have some more data points. So let us look up at another starting data point from the Puranas. So another Puranic time unit, this time Parardha. So as you know, Brahma lives for 50 years, and in each of Brahma's day, there is a night and there's a day, and each is equal to a kalpa. In each kalpa, there are 14 manvantras, and in each manvantara, there are 17 Chaturyugas. So, with that understanding, currently, Brahma just passed his 50 years, and we are in his first day of the 51st year. We have passed through one night. So, we have gone through one kalpa, and we have halfway to the first day of Brahma's current day. Now, why am I talking about this? The reason I'm talking about this because it is described in the Puranas that the 50 years of Brahma, there was elemental disintegration and reconstruction. When I say elemental means that all the elements, according to the Puranas, were completely absorbed. And the process which is described is kind of like very puzzling or very cryptic. But what's clear is that all the elements were dissolved. Now, when did that even happen? So if we add the time since the beginning of current day of Brahma plus this Kalpa, we will get this date. And what does that date correspond to? That date corresponds to 13.819 billion solar years. So this is according to the time, according to the Puranas, when there was an elemental destruction or an elemental construction, however you want to say, that all the elements were absorbed. There was nothing in this universe, but you can say the energy of the Lord. That's what the Purana state. Except the Lord, there was nobody there. Everything else was absorbed into his body. Now, that is strikingly close to the date for Big Bang. So according to the most recent understanding on the cosmology, or by the cosmologist, our universe came into being 13.801 billion years ago. And there's an interesting story how they found out. So there were these two scientists, two American scientists. They were trying to look at building an instrument to send radio waves at the lowest frequency possible, at the lowest temperature possible, because they wanted to develop some technology which could send information without being obstructed by any kind of atmosphere disturbances. So they had this huge antenna on top of the lab, and they were trying to work at this super low temperatures, 3 Kelvin. 0 Kelvin is completely lack of any heat at all, but they're working at 3 Kelvin, and they were noticing this noise. They thought, what's happening? Why is there so much noise coming? So they went around, were looking outside. Maybe there's somebody else who has another antenna close to us, which is disturbing us. There's some other activity happening around. They couldn't find. Then they thought, let's get a mop. Let's go and clean the top of the antenna. They thought maybe there's some bird poop. Some pigeons may have put some poop there. So let's go and check it out. So they went ahead and cleaned the whole antenna. They couldn't. And then they were very close to Princeton. So they started talking to the Princeton scholars that, hey, we are finding this noise in our antenna. And they came across, they thought, oh, that noise may be a noise coming from the Big Bang. So when Big Bang happened, after the Big Bang is described, the 300 million years after that, there was this event called cosmic microwave background radiation. It's like whenever you blow up a firecracker, there is a sound, and that sound, it leaves a wave. So apparently, when the first light came into being, there was this microwave produced, and that microwave is still captured in our universe. And that's what those scientists were observing. They were seeing the signatures of the Big Bang or the origin of the universe. So by using that data in 2001, they were for the first time able to find out how old our universe was. In 2018, the latest estimate is 13.801 billion years. So what took scientists, last few hundred years and hundreds of millions of dollars and technology, was plainly stated in the Puranas as 13.819 billion years ago. So this is striking close. And that's not the end. So I started looking at more dates. According to the Puranas, Shiva, he drank the ocean of poison. And when he was drinking the ocean of poison, there was some poison which dropped from his hands, and that is what gave birth to poisonous living entities. And that was 521 million years ago. According to the scientists or paleontologists, the first species to show any sign of poison glands was 521 million years ago. Again, strikingly close or stunningly close. Again, this is not the end. In my book, I talk about 3 major mass extinctions. I talk about the origin of madman fire. I talk about true polar wonder. I also talk about not just time data, but also spatial data, the distance of heliosphere and layers of Brahmanda, the minimum distance between 2 solar systems. So, there is practically no end to it. But somebody may say, hey, maybe Vyasadeva was lucky. Now, if you look at the data points or the numbers which are discussed in the Puranas, the numbers are as huge as 10 to the power 62. So if he was just guessing, his chances of getting it correct will be 1 over 10 to the power 62. Since he had 3 correct dates, actually many more correct dates, the number becomes astronomically huge. So is it mathematically possible that he guessed? Yes. But is it realistic that he guessed? No. So what's the impact of this research? Well, first, Puranas are not folk stories. And second, Puranas can be used for independent verification of modern scientific claims. Let me show you how. One second. Okay. So I just want to keep an eye on the time. Okay, good. So the scientists have been working on the problem of origin of the sun for the longest time. And because, as soon as you go out and you look at the sun, you think about, hey, how old the sun must be. And you'll be surprised to know that in early 1900s, they thought the sun must be 1 to 10 billion years old. But before that, practically nobody had an idea. Some people thought maybe sun is burning some coal. But if sun is burning coal and it's so hot, it'll probably finish the coal very soon. So that didn't fly. And some people thought, hey, maybe there is, some kind of like a some kind of new chemical, some kind of new chemistry, some kind of new element which we're not aware of, which is burning there. Then people came with so many different theories. It was only in 1938 when Hans Bethe, who got the Nobel Prize later, was the first one who came up with this idea that it is hydrogen particles which are engaging in fusion, which is causing this heat production. So they have had, if you look at this table below, a lot of different dates for the scientific estimate of the origin of the sun. From 1 to 10 to 4.5 to 4.6 to 4.567. So what do we get from this? What we get from this is that that the scientific opinion has gradually, slowly evolved to reach where the Puranas are. The Puranas have been saying the same for the ages. They've been saying that the sun is 4.563 billion year old for the last thousands of years, since the time Vyasadeva wrote them. But the scientific estimate has changed a lot. And they don't have really an independent way of verifying things. They always go through ups and downs. One day they would say this thing works, another day they may say that thing works. So how can we really be sure that the scientists are finally zeroing on something which is actually a real data, which is really a true picture? Now here comes Puranas. Given that Puranas are showing that they are correct in different fields, we can in fact use Puranas as an external independent verification tool for the modern science. Just like when Ramanujan could write so many theorems which took next 100 years and to confirm. In the same sense, Vyasadeva, thanks to his geniusness and thanks to his meditation and his capacity, he was able to write down and compile these Vedic scriptures which have such knowledge which even to date, which is 21st century, can be used to verify modern scientific claims. And this is not just true of this origin of the sun, even in the case of origin of the universe. The numbers were 10 to 20, 11 to 15. So if you see the history, the scientific estimates, until year 1916, the scientists thought the universe is eternal. But thanks to discovery by Hubble telescope, that picture also changed. So what are we getting from this? What I'm trying to drive here is that the Puranas can for the first time provide an independent way to verify scientific claims. I was able to publish this in 2021, my results in European Journal of Science and Religion, and they appreciated it. In fact, there was also an article in Times of India, and DD News also covered it. So, this is some amazing data points that how Ramanujan was able to come up with this genius, work in mathematics, how Vyasadeva, whose work was thought to be folk stories, was able to present such, details regarding our Earth and the universe to such strikingly close figures as modern science. But then, apart from that, how Vedas and Puranas are not really folk stories, there's another point we have to see, another thing we should see, which is that how could Ramanujan, how could Vyasadeva produce such work? Because all of us here, all the people who have assembled here, you're all scientists, and you're all aspiring to yourself make a contribution to the field of science. All of you are aspiring to come up with some new discovery or some new contribution to the modern world. So let's look at their life. Now, Ramanujan, he used to say, an equation for me has no meaning unless it expresses a thought of God. He was actually a worshipper of goddess Namagiri. He used to tell to his colleagues whenever they would ask him when he was in Europe, that how come you come up with such amazing theorems? How do you get the inspiration? What happens? He used to say that I just pray to my goddess Namagiri, and in my dreams she comes and she inspires me. She tells me what to write, and I just write that down. And since I have faith in Nrsimhadev and Namagiri, I have faith that what they're telling me is correct. And with that faith, I write that down. Lo and behold, 100 years later, his work still stands there, on strong footing. Similarly, Srila Vyasadeva describes his own history in the Bhagavad Purana. He tells how he was, in the Bhagavatam, how he was born a fisherwoman, not from a very affluent family, definitely not from a Brahmanical family, but he received training early on from a great teacher, and he spent a lot of time doing meditation on Supreme Lord. And the result, we have Puranas and Vedas. So it seems there's a connecting dot, there's this connecting thread between these great scholars of India. What is the connecting thread? That they invested a lot of time in self-discovery, in building the foundation for the internal growth. And the result, we have works like Vedas, Puranas, and even in modern times, works of Ramanujan. I personally feel that I was able to make such a discovery and able to go through such a large amount of data. I had to study the 18 Puranas, the commentaries in Sanskrit, the translations, and ordinarily to find such data points would have taken me many decades. But I would again say, due to divine inspiration, I was able to make such discovery. In fact, I remember one day when I was working on this problem, I practically woke up at midnight and had an idea, and I started working on it. And that's when I discovered the origin of the Big Bang. So whether it be my personal life or the life history of Vyasadeva or Ramanujan, we can see this connecting thought or this connecting point, that they all had invested seriously into their internal life. And that's how I feel that we can in future keep on making discoveries, keep on making significant contribution by significantly investing in ourselves. So thank you, everyone. I guess it's 32 minutes right now into the talk. I finished faster than I thought. And this is my contact email address. You can reach to me if you have any questions or comments. And I'll be happy to, try and answer them to the best of my capacity.
Thank you so much, Siddharth sir. It was a wonderful presentation. And so I have got a few questions. I'll ask you one by one. So the first question is, if such is the authenticity of the Vedas, then how is it that nobody knows about it?
I briefly discussed that earlier. It goes back to the 18th century. So not actually, sorry, 16th century. So in 16th century in the Europe, there was an important event which happened. I'm not sure if anybody knows about it. It's called Renaissance. So during Renaissance, what happened that in Europe, people were so dogmatic about religion that they were using the religion as a means to crush the people. So it led to a divide between the scientific-minded people and religious-minded people. So in Europe, they became like two sides, two opposing figures, two opposing sides. So from that point onwards, science became a different track and religion became a different track. Now, that happened in Europe in 16th century. But because we also became a European colony, the effect of that divide came also to India. So in India, the imperialists who came to India, they were mostly, you can say, Christian preachers, and they used to laugh. Hey, these Hindu scriptures, they have such big numbers, millions of years, millions of wives, so much money, so many distances. It must be all a figment of somebody's fruitive mind, or somebody who has a really good speculative mind. He must have composed this. So they used to laugh, and because we were all looking at Europeans as somebody who is advanced, we took their same ideas and same conceptions into our schooling system or educational system. And the result, since last 200 or last few hundred years, there's you can say some sense of subconscious indoctrination, where we also started unconsciously equating the Puranas and Vedas with myth, with folk. So thanks to such opinion, people have not paid serious attention to Puranic accounts. There hasn't been, when I was doing this research, I was surprised to see that nobody had paid heed or attention to these data points, which are stated very, very clearly in the Puranas and Vedas. And in last, I would say, few decades, in many fields, it is being shown that the Puranas and Vedas are far ahead of modern science. I'm just showing in this field of cosmology or this paleontology, but I'm sure many of you are aware of the fields of Ayurveda or the field of just yoga, Patanjali yoga. There is also some research work done by in the fields of just pure mathematics, how the Chanda Shastras have these theorems of permutation and combinations, which came a few thousand years before it came in the West. So in a number of modern scientific fields, we are finding that Puranas and Vedas were stating the truth a few thousand years before the modern science could said it. So I see it is something which is going to happen as we go in the future, and more people recognize this contribution of Puranas and Vedas, and more people recognize these works of Vyasadeva. And that also brings me to another point, that actually, when you look at Vedas and Puranas, their main focus is not to give information about our world. In fact, 90% of the text is all about meditation. It's all about how to grow internally, because that's what our sages felt was the most important need for humanity. So I would say 10% of it is given, towards the material world, our bodies, cosmology, but 90% of the text is just talking about, self-growth. And because of that, sometimes people miss, that data and just focus on the self-growth aspect. So because of these two reasons, the content being majorly about self-realization, and because of the doctrination by European schooling, which we haven't paid much attention to it. But I can see in near future, things are already starting to change. So in near future, we may see a big shift in this opinion.
Thank you for that answer. So we have another question from Frijo. Frijo, would you like to unmute and speak? Okay, or I can read out his question. So he's asking, what can we make out of Bhagavatam cosmology with visible scientific cosmology, like Jambudvip, Bhumandal, heavenly, hellish planets, etc.?
That's a great question. It's a great question. And to answer this, first of all, let me explain the question to everybody else. In the Bhagavad Purana, in the Bhagavad Purana, there are 12 cantos. The 5th canto is talking about cosmology, especially cosmogony, not cosmology. Cosmogony is a study of planets and solar systems around us, and it describes how big the Earth is, and then describes other aspects of Earth, other lokas. Now, when we look at those descriptions, you seem to wonder, hey, what's happening here? It's talking about the Himalayas, which is 80,000 miles long. When we see Himalayas, it's only 8 kilometers tall. Even a person who is, say, taking the best type of drug, even he wouldn't write such big numbers. So was Vyasadeva some kind of stoned that he was writing such big numbers? And these numbers are there across the whole 5th canto. So it's difficult to understand what's happening there. But we have to take a look in the light of modern science. Then we can start to understand what's really happening there. So in 1900s, early 1900s, there was a big discovery, and that was Einstein's general theory of relativity. Now, what did he posit? He posited that actually space and time are connected. When you have different types of spaces, time can be slower or faster. If in a space the gravitational pull is very strong, then time can be slowed down. And he also talked about space having more dimensions than just three. And that became the foundation of modern physics. Since that time, there has been hundreds of theories, hundreds of models, which have tried to use higher dimensions or multiple dimensions to express the natural laws around us. You can come down to even recent points, D theory, or I'm not sure what the latest one, D membrane. There's so many different theories out there right now which are talking about higher dimensions. When you take those into account, you start to think, are they all talking about fiction? No, they're not talking about fiction. What they are saying is that ordinarily we only deal with these three dimensions, length, breadth, and height. But actually, the universe around us, or the world around us, is actually higher dimensional. That's what the natural laws are pointing to. When you take those higher dimensions into account, it will be foolish to say that what we measure is what is there. What natural laws, or what the scientific study of natural laws is pointing to us is that there is more around us than what we can measure. So when we look at the fifth canto cosmology in light of that, then we start to understand, is it possible that Vyasadeva was describing a world around us which is higher dimensional? Possible. Is it true that the information which he is giving was not what we observe, but he observed through his meditation? Is that possible? Yeah, it's possible. So it's all about understanding the laws of nature. And as we try to understand laws of nature, we're trying to find out that actually laws of nature are not so straight. They're kind of mystical. And that's what science is all about. It's the journey into the mystic. It's a journey into the mystical world. So is it possible what Vyasadeva was describing in fifth canto cosmology, that can be a true picture of world around us? Yes. Can we verify it with our current means, current methods? Probably not. But what we can verify for sure are the dates of those events. And if he was just writing those numbers for the sake of fun, then his dates would have been way off. But as we can see, practically all the dates mentioned in the Puranas, which have taken modern scientists, millions of dollars, millions of equipments to figure out, have found to be stunningly matching with the modern scientific claims. So that should make us think that maybe there is another way to look at the fifth canto cosmology. There's another way to look at Bhagavatam's cosmology. And because, he has earned so much faith in our mind through his work on Vedic chronology, through Puranic chronology, maybe we should also give him a chance in terms of Puranic cosmogony. Maybe there's also some truth there also. So I'm asking you to be open-minded about it and pay some attention to it.
Thank you for that answer. We have next question from Yash. Yash, would you like to speak?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Siddharth. Thank you for the talk. My question is, are the original transcripts available for the Puranas? And if yes, they would be, I believe, in some other language. So probably Sanskrit. And so what challenges you faced during translation? And there are some things which might have lost in translation. So how did you tackle those kind of challenges?
Yeah, that's a great question. And let me tell you a story in that. So let me share a story. So, when I started this whole work of looking into Puranas, I started with actually English translations. I was not looking at original work. And when I was looking at English translations, many times I would be reading a translation and reading a explanation, I'll be laughing because it would make any sense. I was like, what did the guy say? What did he say? What did he say? And like, what? And I was like, what's happening here? And it happened so many times because I found out, I started looking into the history, that I found out that many of the translations which we have for the Puranas are actually done by people who have never themselves studied it from a teacher. and they were brand new Sanskrit scholars. Most of the translations we have actually right now, even for the Puranas, they're coming from European scholars who did them in late or early 19th century or to late 19th century. So that made me invest some serious time into studying Sanskrit, and also just look at the original Sanskrit inscriptions or the original Sanskrit Puranic scripts. So I started, thanks to my connection with the University of Michigan, I was able to access the scans of Puranas from 17th century, 16th century. I was able to get the scans for them, and then what I would do is I would take a look at those scripts, those manuscripts from 17th century or early 18th century, and I would compare them with the Sanskrit which I have, and then I would invest time into translating them myself, the passages which were relevant for me. And that's how actually I discovered some of the important details of Puranas, like this time unit which I discussed, Prati Sandhi. It is not yet aware of, many scholars are not aware of it yet, because it is there in the Vayu Purana, Brahmanda Purana, and the only translations, there are 4 translations available for that chapter. None of them make any sense. They're like kind of like a funny passage. You just read them, you just laugh. Like, hey, how can somebody write this? But because people who are writing those texts, they're not really well trained in science or Sanskrit, they can't really seem to understand what the author is trying to say and make the translation appropriate. You could be reading the same text in Sanskrit. There's some flexibility there. You could be reading the same text, but if you don't know the context, you can completely make a different meaning out of it, construe a completely opposite meaning. So that's what happened in many places. And yes, that was a big challenge. So I recommend, if anybody who wants to do something similar, that they also invest serious time into studying Sanskrit, because that's how you can get access to it. Or find a person who is very well trained in Sanskrit and the scriptures and read their translations. Like I know in the case of Bhagavatam or Gita, I was particularly impressed by the work done by Srila Prabhupada, because he actually, for each of his translations, he also gives a word for word meaning. So that gives me an opportunity to look at how is this meaning derived, and gives also the original Sanskrit and then the translation. So he has been a person who really impressed me and inspired me. So I try to follow the same in my work also. If you look at my writings and my paper, my book, I always try to give the original Sanskrit, then a word for word translation, and then a translation. So yeah, that's the proper way to do this kind of research, is to look at the original source.
So as sir also mentioned about the Gita, I would just pause here and would like to introduce you to our voice club, what we do actually throughout the year. So we have something called Learn Gita in 6 days, where we cover the 5 topics of Bhagavad Gita through presentations. And one who attends it knows the overview of Bhagavad Gita. Apart from that, we also have something called Gita Study Circle, wherein we actually open Bhagavad Gita and read it shloka by shloka, everything in depth. And we present it very logically. They are conducted weekly, approximately an hour a week, and in a batch of just 2 to 3, making it highly interactive. So anyone has any questions, it will be answered then and there. And what we have seen is there is observable change in those who have attended it. So actually, this is an opportunity we want to present it to you. We will be sending a form at the end, and we will request you to fill it. And there we have an option. If you are interested, you can enroll for the same. Okay, so going ahead with the Q&A. So one question has come. What if later we get to know that some other data points do not match at all, unlike what you presented?
Yeah, very good. It's a good, it's a great, objection. And I get this objection a lot. See, we have to also see that we're not considering data points or these factoids only from one field of science. So the date of the sun comes from astrophysics. The date of the original universe comes from cosmologists, completely different field of science. And then there from mass extinction comes from paleontology. So you have these 3 different fields of science, which are using completely disparate means of accessing knowledge of the world. Now, say one could be wrong, and then other 2, could be correct. But to have all the 3 fields completely wrong, it will be a big shift in modern science. So it is true that science does change its opinion about different topics, but in general, there is a way in which it changes its opinions. And since we're getting this confirmation or this strong similarity, strong congruence between these disparate fields of science, we can be sure that there is some strong correlation here, which is not going to change in the future. If it was just one field of science, yes, I could be doubtful. But when you have so many different vast types of science which are not related to each other, are independent of each other, that gives me faith in this understanding, in this comparison.
One last question I have received. There are so many other things in the Vedas that is not comprehensible. They don't look like ordinary human activities or so. So it makes us think that they are simply stories, and what you presented is only a part of the Vedas. So is it right to extrapolate and accept all of the Vedas?
Definitely not. I'm not asking you to accept, just based on these data points, everything which is said in the Vedas and Puranas to be completely true. In fact, the Vedas and Puranas, the Shukadeva Goswami himself says, is taken also not just as a factual story, but also as a poetic presentation. And whenever there's a poetic presentations, there are sometimes alankars. There are these you can say jewels of writing, where sometimes there is use of extravagance, extravagance, like using more than what is needed. So how do we take Vedas and Puranas? What I'm here offering is two things. One, I'm asking you to look at the life history of Vyasadeva, that how was he able to describe this material world in such precise accuracy, and what was the means by which he achieved it. That's one thing I'm asking you to look at. And second, I'm asking people to give a second thought to their understanding that Puranas and Vedas are folk stories. Now, these data points show that they're definitely not folk stories, and there's definitely a strong line of truth amongst them. So what I'm asking you to do is to study the Vedas and Puranas with an open mind and give its due respect, because of the amount of contribution it has made in terms of our life, whether it be our social life, or as you can see here, even in terms of modern scientific history, it's able to state these facts which are astoundingly or stunningly found to be correct by modern science. So what I'm asking for is more respect and open-mindedness in study of Vedas and Puranas. And what I'm asking also you to do is to see how great scholars have made big discoveries or have made significant contribution. It's by investing in themselves. So these are the two threads which I'm trying to point out to here today.
Thank you so much for that answer. And if anyone has any other question, this is the chance. So actually, personally, it inspires me a lot, to know more about the Vedas, the way you have explained. This presentation has actually triggered our inquisitive mind. So it was really a wonderful explanation, and we are very grateful to have you with us. So I know that it's a different time in the USA. It's early morning now, but still you agreed to join us, and we would love to have your association again in the future, if possible.
Thank you.
So thank you all for joining, and thank you, sir. So we would end here. Thank you very much. I request all of you to please go ahead and click the link and fill the form. Thank you.